Welcome everybody. We have a limited audience here in person, but hopefully more of you will be watching this video that we're recording. My name is Jason White. I'm an Amherst school board member, and with me tonight are members of administration and an educator from AMS. I'll introduce them, but the purpose of tonight is to discuss the impact of the facility on education and educational programming and educational outcomes. So we'll go from most important. So it's a Sue Sprinkle, 7th grade social studies teacher at AMS. And then to my right is Kathleen Murphy, principal here at Clark Wilkins. Well, here and Clark, even though it's the same name. And then Christine Landwirl, who is our assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum mainly, but assistant superintendent. And then to her right, finally, is Steve Chamberlain, and he always likes to put the emphasis on interim superintendent. So our interim superintendent. I just want to thank everybody for joining us, and we're off.
Jason, thank you. And thanks to everybody for joining, and to Anna and Jeannie, thanks for coming. We're so very informal tonight. I'm just going to introduce and talk a little bit about why a project, and then we're going to break it down and talk a little bit at the end about outcomes. Just a little bit. So this is my 36th year in public education. 35th year in New Hampshire. I worked at a school and was part of the planning of a brand new school. That was Hollis Brookline High School. I was there before Hollis Brookline was there, and was part as a math department head through the entire project. And then as a superintendent in Hopkinton, New Hampshire, right outside of Concord, I worked on about a $10.5 million addition, a 4-classroom addition, some life safety stuff, some access stuff. And it's been a privilege to join this project at this stage, at the end, learning from everybody. But it was very interesting. My tour 2 springs ago from Christine, one of the things we visited, and Anna was there, was the portables here at Clark Wilkins. And I had no idea that Amherst, New Hampshire had a set of portables. They were hidden way back. It wasn't part of, some districts put them in front, very, very obvious, and right, but they were hidden in back. And I think within 2 minutes, they had talked about that the portables had a fire at one point and the struggles. So that was the impetus, and how they introduced the facility project to me. So why would a district, why would administrators, why would a community begin this journey? And it began 5+ years ago about taking a look at a project. One of the issues, one of the topics that is often discussed with the Ways and Means Committee in this community is outcomes and data. And Christine and I talked about this today. If we were just going after increased student achievement, she and I would not drop $54 million into a facility. That is not that direct piece. We'd work on professional development, class time, instructional time, all that fun stuff. So why a project? There's 2 main reasons why school districts in New Hampshire, as I see it, enter a project. One is when your life safety concerns, life safety operations and systems are at the end of life, and it's such a massive reno, and also in space. And in Clark Wilkins, we have both. So we'll talk, and we'll break this down. We have a couple more sessions, one more tomorrow. We'll talk about some of these things, and we have another one next week to talk about partnerships and then school safety and financing. But for the life safety piece, it's well documented that I think everybody agrees that the systems for Clark Wilkins School are end of life and they need to be replaced. The space issue, it's been very interesting for me to, as an observer, to take a look at the space issue. One of the things is we have portable classrooms, and we'll talk about the safety implications tomorrow night. But we've also had some best practice changes. The board in this community has invested in a couple of programmatic changes and a couple of initiatives, very, very important to student learning, that has impacted space in this building. One of which is full-day kindergarten. I applaud the Amherst community for embracing full-day kindergarten. It is a research evidence-based effort. We know that engaging a longer school day in early elementary allows both the academic growth as well as play and social emotional growth, which schools, and the one that I did as well as I was a superintendent of a district that went from half day to full day while I was there. And it was in direct response to teachers who were struggling trying to fit in the academic time as well as playtime. And the answer to that, for a well-rounded whole student approach to kindergarten, which is so important, was full day. And because of that, instead of having half the classrooms in the morning and the afternoon, we had to add classroom spaces, about 3. I get that. And then we would like to move the portables in. I get that. And then the other piece is special programs for kids to make sure we educate those in the community. It is best practice. We respect and care for all kids, and we believe that every single student deserves to be educated within their home community. And there was a lot of talk about, oh, can we send kids out? Can we send kids out? Send who, what kids out? Where? And why would we target some of our most educationally challenged and families? So all that did consume absolutely some of the space, no question. But that is financial. It is the financial, it's the ethical, it's the moral, and it's the right thing to do. So why are we headed into this project? Why 5 years ago did this incredible effort be undertaken by incredible hours by community members? It's because we got to fix the life safety and we got to take care of space. And I've had a privilege of working with Kathleen, mostly this year. Last year, we were just kind of hanging out together because I was more secondary, but this year, a little more up close and personal. And right before this, I was a principal of a school where every day the building was in my way. And I know Kathleen and Anna live like that here, where instead of being in classrooms, being an instructional leader, you're arranging NEWA testing, you're arranging this space, you're dealing with this space. And I lived that so much that I have great empathy that in order for us to provide the instructional leadership that we need, we want administrators in the classrooms, and we want this place as efficient and as productive as possible. So the goal is to make the building a tailwind in our improvement journey and not a headwind that actually slows our progress. So it is necessary, it is important. This is if you walk around the school, please, I know this is on video, if you need a tour, Kathleen will give it to you anytime. But there really is sound reasons, both in life safety piece and space piece, and we really want this building to support education, not inhibit it. So that's my 2 cents on just the why piece. We'll turn it over to Christine to talk more about specifically how the educational will be impacted by a new facility.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I just have a few examples to share about some of the challenges we face with our educational programming with the current facility that we have. First of all, we do not have small group intervention spaces for a teacher to work with a small group of students. We only have large full-sized classrooms. So what we've done is we've divided those classrooms up into 4 different intervention spaces, which space-wise, like the amount of room that takes up, is a pretty appropriate amount of room, a little cozy, but certainly make do if we are doing small group instruction with 3 or 4 or 5 students at a time. But the challenge really is that there are 4 different lessons or intervention or services happening at the same time. So for example, we have a room with 2 speech language pathologists trying to work on both speech and language, being able to hear the students and the students needing to be able to hear the speech language pathologist. They're sharing a space along with 2 other special educators. So to provide the services that these students need and deserve, it's in a high noise, high distraction space. And we do the best that we can with those spaces. We try to partition them off, and we try to group like services together. We have 4 reading specialists all sharing one room. We have 2 math interventionists sharing a space along with 2 special educators. The collaboration is amazing. We've seen some great collaboration across those interventionists, but from a student service perspective, it's a challenge to have 4 different small groups of instruction happening at the same time for our neediest students, where they don't need that extra distraction of all having to share a room in a very cozy space. The other thing that we wanted to share is really the challenge that we have with our multi-purpose room. Our multi-purpose room is both here at Wilkins is both a cafeteria and a gymnasium. And what that means is that when lunch is happening, it's impossible to have a PE class happening at the same time. And you can say, oh, well, PE can be outside. Not all year and not in all weather can PE be outside. So we'd love to be able to plan for PE to be happening at the same time that lunch is happening. And it really inhibits our schedule that we can't have PE and we can't schedule any specials during that lunch block. And again, that's 30 minutes for each grade level. And there are 4 grade levels that have lunch. That's 2 hours a day that the PE teacher has an unusable space, that his classroom is being used for lunch. We do the best that we can. We have a curtain that gets pulled and he immediately starts class as the custodian is still cleaning up from lunches. And we really do the best that we can with that, but it is a huge challenge. It impacts our entire master schedule, not being able to schedule our PE classes at the same time that lunch is happening. The other thing here at Wilkins, we're getting very close to needing to put either art or music or both on a cart. We've resisted and we've done every single thing we can do. We made a conference room in a storage space behind the stage to prevent trying to take that art or music classroom. We actually moved one of our programs into our conference room, which is why we lost our conference room and it's behind on the stage. We are completely out of space. We have, people working basically in small little spaces that were intended to be storage closets. We have been as creative as possible, and we are running out of options and spaces. So it is a challenge. If music or art needs to go on a cart, it completely changes the curriculum they're able to deliver. First of all, music is very disruptive on a cart because our classrooms were not built to be completely soundproof between all of the classrooms. So every music class is going to interrupt the academic classes happening around. So as music pushes into a first grade class, the other two first grade classes on that share a wall and are trying to teach math or reading at that time are going to be impacted and even across the hallway. So that presents a challenge. Right now, our music room is specifically situated in a space that limits the disruption to those around. It also impacts the program we can offer to students. So many of the musical instruments, and when we had a fire in our portable and a lot of people were disrupted, music did go on a cart. So we were able to experience that for a very short period of time. And our music teacher is incredible. And he was even moving xylophones into classrooms and trying to keep his curriculum the same. And he just couldn't. He did the best that he could. And he really tried, but it limits any musical instruments that are able to be brought into classrooms. It's just too much to be carting from classroom to classroom. And again, storage is a challenge. So where does that live? And then rarely is there even enough time to be getting the appropriate materials, getting to the classes, as often teachers are back to back with their classes. Again, same thing. We've been very lucky to not have to put art on a cart, but the second you put art on a cart, even though it sounds great, yes, even though it sounds funny, you completely change the projects students are able to do. There's very little painting, very little pottery that can occur, and it's pretty much down to mostly drawing in art. And we have an incredible art teacher and an incredible art program right now, and a fairly nice facility and space. Storage becomes a huge issue for art. And even if you wanted to paint in the classroom, where those paintings get stored to dry, is nearly impossible to find a location or a spot for that. So we have done everything that we can to prevent moving art and music on a cart, but we're very close to being able to do that. And it's, depending on numbers for next year, one of those specials may need to move on a cart. Right now, we do have technology on a cart. That was our one special, both technology and guidance kind of travel to the classrooms. And that was really to prevent the impact to the curriculum for art and music and disruption to the other classes. Technology is a challenge being on a cart. It was still a sacrifice for us to say, we no longer have a computer lab here. Our technology teacher has to push a pretty big, heavy cart full of laptops. It's probably here in the room somewhere, full of laptops to every single classroom.
They're not easy to move.
They are not easy to move.
Awful.
Yes. And then take a laptop out for every student for her probably 40-minute class. So you can imagine how much class time she actually has for technology and how much class time the students have. By the time the laptops get passed out, students get logged in, and then she's able to start her lesson. So just the time it takes to not have a dedicated technology space is impeding the amount of time our students have hands-on with technology. Now, again, we do have some technology in our classrooms, and our teachers are supporting technology use as well. But that's really where we deliver a bulk of our curriculum and our targeted support to students with exposure to technology. So all of these become pretty significant challenges, and even not having a technology space or lab, when we do any sort of standardized testing, We can do that in the classroom with our laptops, and we'll sometimes end up taking laptops for third grade and bringing them to second grade. So second grade can test, then we're bringing it down to first grade. So it's a lot of rotating laptops, but the challenge becomes when we need to do makeup testing. So Kathleen's trying to run a makeup session with 2 students from this room, 5 students from this room, 3 kids from this room. Where do you go to do that makeup testing? Kathleen has had to do NWEA testing in the hallway, in the NPR. There's really no usable space. We've sometimes even displaced our library media specialist and taken over the library for NWEA testing. But again, that impacts what she's able to deliver, not being able to be in her room with her space and her materials. So we are really at the point where it has impacted programming, but we have done every single thing that we can to try to limit the impact that we've had. And we're at the point where we're concerned that the impact is going to be even more significant at this point.
Yeah. Thank you,
Kathleen.
Christine. Excellent summary of, a lot of our challenges there. I would add to that, as we think about the specialists, Christine did a great job of really describing some of the situations specific here to Wilkins too. What I think oftentimes members in our community may not even realize until they enroll students with us and begin their kindergarten journey and experience is that we are 2 buildings, 2 physical buildings that are that we are one school, right? So we have another school building in addition to this one that we're sitting in tonight, that we're also providing our students with great experiences and that, struggling to maintain the space. So, that space in that building, we talk about specialists here being impacted and losing spaces like the music room at Clark School. We don't have a music room, and we don't have a library, and we don't have an art room. And our cafeteria is everything, right? So right now, our kindergarten students in the community of Amherst, their library, art, music, PE, it is all occurring in that multi-purpose room, right? So we do not have space to run the same number of classrooms, to offer these preschool and kindergarten programs and still maintain other environments that are really important for our students. Our teachers are incredible. They will make anything work, and they'll do it with a smile, and they'll make sure that the kids are engaged and it is high quality for them, but the space is simply a challenge. And I would say, examples being, we roll some of these bookshelves against a wall in the multipurpose room at Clark so students can have PE, right? Not quite ideal if we're trying to work on some of those skills and, for students to have obstacles in their way already, just in our given space. In the new building, all of the students that are currently housed at Clark would be together here on this site with all the students at Wilkins. So we would be able to offer more programming to preschool and kindergarten students with the other portion of our student body at Clark Wilkins. There would be access and developmentally appropriate spaces for arts and music and library and PE for all kids in the community. And that's really important for us. Also, just some of the efficiencies that you can have when you are running one school versus 2 physical buildings and calling, and titling that one school, right? So, an example, this isn't just about me, but I physically can't be in 2 places at once. So if I am at Clark, then I am not here. If I am here, then I am not at Clark, right? So my ability to provide that in the moment support to staff and students and parents in the community, one of those buildings, it's a miss for that at any portion of the day. So we do our very best with our administrative team to always have coverage and support of these buildings. So we have one team member that is not with the other team members, right? As we think about ensuring that all of the spaces are covered, we rely upon our teachers, our office managers to be able to help support us differently because of our challenge with 2 buildings. We have 2 nurses. Their collaboration is challenging, to meet the needs of the students. One is always in one building and the other is in this building. They are dynamic. They rotate every week and they stay in constant communication about kids to ensure that they're building relationships with families from the earliest moment we get these students to us, whether that's preschool or kindergarten, so that families know that, we've got your students, we understand them, we know who they are as a family, and we're progressing forward on your kind of journey with us here at Clark Wilkins. But that's a challenge when you're in 2 physical spaces, right? Our specialists being in one space, they'll have the opportunity for greater levels of collaboration. Anytime that our staff are, together, even the kindergarten and the first grade teachers, the opportunity to be together, it's not as frequent when we're talking about moving staff from one building to another, right? So we've all been in the village traffic at the end of the school day too, when we're trying to, come together for things like a staff meeting or professional development time. We have to be really more planned and intentional with that. The opportunity to connect in the hallway about a student doesn't exist for our kindergarten to first grade teachers like it does for other teachers at different grade levels. And that sometimes that quick conversation can be the most valuable, right? So it just has to look different for our staff. In addition to, the challenges within the two buildings, even within existing buildings, as Christine mentioned before, we saw an increase in enrollment this summer at one particular grade level. So our first grade this summer, we grabbed 24 new students, which, we've often have gotten new students in first grade, usually around 12 to 15. 24 was kind of large for us. So that's a whole class. So we needed to open another section of first grade here, and we had to move one of our specialized programs into that conference room space. So we are operating a specialized program in a space that's much smaller than a traditionally designed classroom, meets the needs of the program, isn't certainly ideal, but something that we're able to provide for our students, who need that type of service. What happens there was that our staff lost their conference room. So our teachers do not have a dedicated space to come together outside of, the lunch break room, right? So they're trying to have conversations maybe about students, maybe about curriculum, and it's a challenging situation to be in when you don't have a dedicated space to do that. They're meeting in what we're calling a conference room, but really it is a storage behind the stage. We've put a table behind the stage and it is sheer storage. There isn't temperature control in the back behind the stage. We are, looking at materials from props from shows while we're trying to discuss students and curriculum and data and have discussions about how we're moving forward and supporting each other as a school community. Certainly not ideal. As I said, our staff are incredible. We've done everything to kind of spruce it up. People always have great ideas as to how we can clean up space and spruce it up, but that's a challenge, right? So the work that teachers do every day is a challenge, right? We are in a field that, it's tough work and our teachers are incredible. And we've already put another little bit of an obstacle there by not having the great space for them to be able to collaborate and come together. So, that same space is used for parent meetings, which poses a challenge too when you need to have a confidential parent meeting and you don't have the location to be able to do that. I think, as we think about the new building and the potential for benefits from that new building, we think across multiple levels, right? We think across the idea of meeting our targeted class size requirements, right? So when you have the space for more classrooms and you're not disrupting programming like art and music and PE and technology, right? You're able to meet those targeted class size goals that, the school board has and our community has, a lot easier because you're not faced with that tough decision of, okay, so now music isn't going to be able to use instruments for this period of the school year, or art isn't going to be able to provide the same level of curriculum programming, in order to open up an additional section here. We've also had to retrofit classrooms. We used our old tech lab and had to move a server that was in the tech lab into the hallway. So now in the middle of one of our hallways, there's a server kind of tucked away in the corner because we, already repurposed one of those spaces that wasn't necessarily a traditional classroom space. In the new building, the classrooms are they're more designed for an educational purpose. So things like sinks in classrooms seem really small, but they're huge. They are so important. Only 6 of our classrooms here at Wilkins have sinks, right? So I've had first grade teachers when we had more sections than 6. We've used portable sinks. I've had teachers bring camp sinks in order for students to be able to wash their hands and clean paintbrushes after a project in the classroom. We did go through a period of portable sinks, also, especially when we were responding to the global pandemic and ensuring that we had enough spaces for students to be able to wash their hands before and after eating snack and throughout the day. Our classrooms will be designed in order to accommodate the needs of teaching and learning for students. So items like sinks, items like, appropriate levels of storage so that teacher materials can be placed in locations that they're readily accessible for them, but they're not in the way of students, moving around the classroom environment, right? So right now, many of our teachers, stack up items in their classroom that they need to access throughout the year because there isn't a place for storage. And our building, as I said, our conference room is in our storage space. So we don't have another location for teachers to store, maybe materials that they don't need in the moment, but they're going to need later in the school year. And that's impacting their classroom and all of the spaces they have for students to work and learn each day. Our classroom designs in the new building, meet the Department of Education requirements for adequate classroom spaces for those early elementary levels. And that's an important component, but it's also important because to us, it also matters that they're a bit larger than our current classrooms. So students have more space to move and engage in the type of learning we're looking for students to do now, which includes much more collaboration, more small group time with classroom teachers, more opportunity to work with partners and to be able to engage in things independently and on their own, and to have flexible seating in the classroom to be able to move around the environment in a way that is a little different than what might have looked like traditional classrooms with rows of desks, in the past. So we need spaces that we're easily able to create those environments. And right now our teachers are doing many of those things, kind of retrofitting the environment that they currently have to make that work as best as they can. But there are challenges that, our current environment doesn't allow us to kind of overcome. So, we're doing everything we can to make it work, but it's definitely something that in a new building would be much more improved.
So you want to talk about from the teacher perspective and learning how a building can either enhance or, headwind, tailwind as you as a teacher and learning in your classroom?
Yeah, and just as an aside, I don't know, I feel like, I've been here 20 years. I feel like I've professionally grown up here. This is my first job out of college, and I've been very fortunate to be here for all 20 years. And we've had incredible teaching staff, support staff, and also our building and maintenance people, because they have so creatively, they've been like MacGyvers to keep things going and find ways to make things work. So I wanted to, put that out there. And being in the middle grade world, we're really dependent on a strong foundational start, really dependent on creating those foundations and those opportunities to really build on those skills. And the building does impact how much of those like student ready skills they can really master in a sea of things. One of the things that can be really challenging, as you were talking about band and instruments and sound and those types of things, I think it sounds like a silly phrase, right? Noise pollution. But that's a real thing. When you think about little kids, their bodies are growing physically, right? Like their legs, their bones, all those things, none of those things are growing at the exact same rate. So they need to move. They're trying to concentrate. There's so many inner thoughts, and they're learning how to manage those pieces. When we're asking them to concentrate and learn those foundational skills, and simultaneously there are screams and music and other things happening all around, you can only tune that out so much, and I think that's a challenge when you have space issues and you're struggling to have a space that allows for one classroom to have a quiet learning experience if they're working on perhaps a writing assignment or something of that nature, while simultaneously education has taken a major shift, I think, for the good. And we want students to have experiential learning. We want them to be problem solvers. We want them to be critical thinkers. So that's not a quiet thing, right? To figure those things out, you have to be able to make mistakes. You have to be able to collaborate. And quite honestly, when you're trying to share your ideas and talk through something, I watched my own, 6-year-old. I'm like, just 1 minute, right? They're all talking at the same time because they're so excited. but when you don't have the space to really give them the opportunity to engage in those conversations, to really engage in the playful work of learning, right? Because that's what the hard work is for kids. And really good instruction that my colleagues offer is really immersive in those hands-on collaborative opportunities and small group instruction. But when you have a classroom where you have to physically push things out of the way, or you have spaces where you have to vacate just so that a meeting can come in, it changes the dynamic of the lesson and, quite honestly, the momentum. And anybody that works with kids or has interacted with kids knows that energy is one of their greatest qualities and can be one of their most, challenging obstacles, right? So how do you channel that and work within that? Just before the meeting started, I kind of chuckled and I picked up my phone just to make a little note for myself. The heating systems, so touch and go. And within that, I mean, what's nice is at least it's like one floor for the most part, but it's hot and you don't have the cross breeze to get air circulation. And little bodies perspire differently, as they developmentally evolve. But if you have kids working and doing that hard work, and you have a teacher trying to deliver instruction while you have the heating system kick on, it's awfully difficult for students to be able to focus in and learn how to build that focus, learn how to build that perseverance on a task. Those are all muscles and skills that students have to exercise to be able to do bigger, harder work as time goes on. I think about just how they divided up space, and even with meetings, the number of times you're moving from classroom instruction to running to a meeting or trying to set someone else up successfully to cover your class so you can attend the meeting. It doesn't feel good professionally to not know where to go and to feel like I'm walking in late, or that I'm abandoning my kids because I haven't had enough time to really explain what it is they're doing while I'm running to try and meet someone else's needs. It's hard to feel like I have to choose which children in which moment, and that doesn't feel good as a teacher. It's also really hard confidentiality speaking. For me to engage, I have a loud voice. I have a problem. It is a problem I have been working on my whole life. I had somebody just say to me the other day, "You were really shouting. Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't seem to have a volume filter. I work on it though. So if I'm shouting now, please tell me." But as a result, if we're meeting in a space that is not a dedicated private meeting space, my ability to speak in full confidence and making sure that I am respectful of my student and that family, it's very limiting. People watch us walk in, and then, if they're up against the wall, I know I've had that experience where I've had students share out something that they heard that they weren't supposed to be in a certain area, but it's not a private space. That feels awful. I can tell you there is nothing more important as a teacher than being the teacher that each student needs me to be. And when you're faced with a challenge that you can't change those confines, it's so disheartening to recognize that you're not able to truly be what they needed. And no matter how much you try to tell yourself it's okay, it doesn't feel good. There are a lot of incredible programs offered, and I'm very proud and am thrilled to encompass all learners. As a social studies teacher, there once was a time when I did not get to have all students come through my classroom. And that has been a shift that I really, really love. And I have seen incredible benefits from all students. And one of the challenges is offering privacy. And this is for all students, whether you're in a specialized program or not. I can't tell you the number of times we'll have a student have a really difficult time. And you know where their private space is to help them calm down? The hallway. You couldn't ask for a more public space. And when someone is having a crisis or a real challenge, to be able to preserve their dignity and respect as anyone would want when you're having a hard time, I don't care how old you are, that doesn't feel good. And the only other option would be for me to clear out, or for elementary teachers, and it's happened where they have to clear out the classroom to make the learning environment as safe as possible for that student. That impacts everyone. And that's a level that's part of like the invisible backpack that we end up adding to unintentionally as the day goes on. And that's very hard to know. The collaborative opportunities, while those space changes have been really positive from that, can also be quite limiting when you're trying to deliver and really target a certain task. You're asking a child, you know, I feel like me running, not a great moment, but you want me to work on a skill that's hard for me, that's going to make me exhausted, that's going to tax every piece of me. And I have to do it on display in front of others. My most private, insecure moments where I've got a team cheering me on, but developmentally, the older I get, the more I notice that not everyone else is in this room with me. I had to leave that room. I have to walk out and go to this other space. That's an uncomfortable feeling, and you can see it on kids' faces, you know. And again, there are all sorts of creative ways. You always plan a transition. The whole class is up and moving, just so that those one or two students have the dignity to walk out of the room. But it doesn't always line up perfectly, and that's very hard. There's a lot of emphasis on test scores, and I get it. Like, there has to be a benchmark somewhere. When there is not a dedicated space where you can ensure that it is in a space to focus with equipment that you are comfortable using, you know how to use, and that's hard. You know, it would be like trying to take a class that's half in another language, right? It's just hard to do. So you might be able to perform better, but between the noise distractions, the technology, you know, maybe it didn't charge because you were going from class to class. I've seen that, but we don't have enough outlets. And then you're plugging powered cords to power cords. And so now you have a tripping hazard as well as a fire hazard trying to do that. And I'm not proud to say it, but I know that that happens in my classroom. I'll speak to I won't put anyone else's classroom on the block for that.
I didn't hear that. So
You didn't hear a thing. 10 years ago, I remember being told, Susan, you can't plug your computer into this power cord and then plug it into the wall. Unfortunately, due to the space constraints, that does have to happen. So there are shifts that make things really difficult. Again, you know, this is their first experience in education in school. This is the foundation of being excited to learn. And kids are amazing. Like, they don't, you know, they roll with any of it because they don't know any different. But I just think kids deserve better. I just think our kids deserve better. And I've watched over the 20 years of being here, and I have students, you know, daily talk about how depressed they feel, you know, and that's not what you want. No matter how much you put posters on the wall and you paint and you move things around and you come in with a smile, you know, at the end of the day, our kids need a space that allows them to grow. And I think that as families, we owe it to children.
Thank you, Sue.
I'm just gonna fast forward 5 years, and the project has passed, and we are now in the new school. One of the things that I've learned in my 18 months here is the focus on data and the focus on outcomes, and it's a good push. It really is. And people have challenged me and others to say, "Well, what are the educational outcomes we can expect from the new building?" And as I started this, it's not the direct. So I talk a lot about research and evidence-based practices. And great instruction in Amherst, New Hampshire, great instruction at a school is great instruction. But what a building can do, it can support what we call concomitant learning, the subcomponents. So as Kathleen talked about, a new building increases collaboration. That is a research evidence-based practice. A new building can, that is a tailwind in this, it allows Kathleen and her team to be in classrooms more, administrators in classrooms more, is an evidence and research-based practice. And we would expect, I think you can say that once the building gets out of the way, and we're going to increase staff and student attendance because we have a proper functioning HVAC system and a healthier building, that's going to increase achievement. And there's the climate in general, when you walk into a new building that is built, as Kathleen talked about, built to design for education, designed for learning, that also increases student achievement. So all the subcomponents of this, I looked one of the ways and means person in the eye and said, yes, achievement will increase once we are up and running and fully embraced with a building that supports learning as opposed to inhibits learning. I think we will be able to track, and I absolutely believe student staff attendance will increase when we have a healthy building. I believe, and we talked about this briefly before, and Jason said this too, we're in the most competitive environment for teachers I've ever seen in my 36 years. If you have a teacher who's going to walk into a brand new building, I want to work here, or a building that's not, I think we're going to get more job applicants, and we're going to be more competitive in the hiring of the very best teachers. I believe that because climate and the working environment does matter. And I think, and we've seen it, I was telling, so I started at Hollis Brookline High School a billion years ago. We had 330 kids in high school. After the new high school was built, it went to over 1,200. It settled in about 700 to 800. But when I was there in the old school, in the old white building, less than 400 kids. We will be, for those who are value public education value, we will become more of a desirable place, which means property values go up and more applicants and more building permits go up. All those are connected to outcomes that we can measure. Now, the question, will I be here to be held accountable for this? Well, Jason, I can talk about that. But I think we have evidence in other schools when they've done investing in projects within half hour from here, that these are the things that's happened. And I think it's fair to start looking about tangible outcomes from an extraordinary investment of this community into early education. And I don't think it's too much to expect all of those outcomes. And I think it will be, I feel, based on the research and the experience, I think when this building becomes in support of learning will increase. But I understand the investment. I really feel very confident that in 5 years, when we are up and running, you will see dramatic improvements in all areas of this place.
A lot of the staff and personnel live in town.
Mhm.
I mean, they recognize that this is, also their tax dollar,
Absolutely.
and it does change the value you can feel as an employee to be able to walk into a healthy, safe, appropriate space.
We plan on these for just about an hour, so about 10 minutes. Do you have any questions from anybody up here? Again, tomorrow night, we talk about town school partnerships and safety stuff, how this will improve safety and security. Next week, we dig into the numbers. We talk about financing. We'll talk about the different approaches of financing, the state building aid application, as well as decisions about length and terms of bonds, trying to dig in and make sure people understand what the decisions are in the process for how you finance a project of this size. But for educational questions for us, please.
I'm really hoping that there's a lot of people who are watching this tonight, because I'm the only member of the audience that doesn't, well, maybe you may be from outside of the school system. I'm not.
My
sure.
kids are in school.
Okay.
We just moved here this summer.
Thanks for coming to Amherst and tonight.
I've been working on JFAC for all these years as well, and I'm it's tonight, to hear from you all, again, and I know the situation, but I'm hoping that others will be able to hear this as well. When you're very dedicated administrators and teachers, and who are telling the story of a very dire situation. We've arrived at a place where you've done everything you could to hold on, and work within the spaces that you have. And it's really, it's just very frustrating to think that we, as a community, are happy with that situation. We just can't be, because in the end, it only impacts our kids in a negative way. We don't want depressed kids in these kind of situations. Sure, achievement will certainly increase, but in the end, that's not my goal. My goal is to create make sure that we have space for kids to grow and learn. So the questions that I have, and I just really want you to talk a little bit more about the very negative situation that four portable classrooms present to kids and to teachers. And the other thing is the very positive move to move the 5th grade into this new space, and how that grade configuration is so much more educationally sound. So if you could talk about those two things, I'd appreciate it.
Great questions. Someone take a portable. We're going to talk a lot about portables and safety
Yeah.
version tomorrow, but we can talk more about education.
Definitely. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. So the portable classrooms were designed, I believe they're on year 25 right now,
Sounds about right.
the community. So they were designed to be a temporary fix. That temporary fix has become pretty lengthy fix. I have been here for 6 years, and I've experienced 2 different fires in the portable. And we have repaired and replaced. One fire was significant enough that we had to relocate students into the building for an extended period of time to basically do an overhaul of some of the wiring and the bathroom fan that, started that fire in the portable classroom. And we have had to use it for classrooms, moving forward from there. The classroom space, I think one of the perks of being in the portables, kids will tell you about, is that they are the only space in the building that's air conditioned. So that is like, I would say one of the selling points for our students. However, you're not connected to the school community. So, you are stepping out. So even in the morning, you come into the building as a 4th grader, you enter the building, you have your breakfast with us, maybe you're greeted, you check in the main office, you wave to your peers and your friends and your former teachers, and then you have to walk outside to then walk up a ramp to get to your classroom. So that feeling of that one school community, it just feels a little different for those students, right? And, the teachers out there, as I said before, all of our teachers are incredible, and they make the best they can with the situation they're in. They call them the islands, because it is kind of like a bit of an island to the Clark Wilkins school building, right? For those students, for any of those students who need to receive additional reading intervention, math enrichment, speech and language, OT, whether they need to just come and check in with one of us in the office or a counselor, they need to go outside, weather the elements, which we're in northern New England. So, quite often can look like snow and rain and chilly temperatures, throw on a coat to then get inside of the building. And as Steve, mentioned, tomorrow night, we'll talk more about that safety feature, right? And the safety concerns, of students exiting spaces, 9-year-olds exiting a classroom environment, needing to be outside and then buzz back into another building to go and, experience math enrichment with students across different classrooms. So, that impacts their ability as students to kind of navigate the full school community. For the teachers that are out there, it limits their ability to collaborate with all of their colleagues inside of the building. So, it's another, it's those quick hallway conversations, as I mentioned before, with the 2-building model, those can be the most valuable for us as educators. You're checking in, hey, I'm working on this. Was this a problem, in your classroom last year? Or what did you do to try to make make this work. And those teachers, it's just limited for them in their ability to do that. They have to come back into the school building. And it just proves to be more challenging for that collaboration between the teachers that are in that environment and the teachers that are inside of the building. The teachers make it work, but it is not the ideal situation that we would want our teachers to be in to collaborate and to improve outcomes for students.
I know the fifth grade.
Oh, yeah, fifth grade.
Do you want to
Go ahead, you
speak to
can
that?
start.
I'll start. And then you
Yeah,
can-
yeah. They forgot the second
Um,
part.
Yeah, as Jeannie mentioned, those grade levels kind of go together well.
Mhm.
Our state standards are written where we really have chunked our standards into really K2 standards, and then 3-5 standards, and then middle school standards are typically that 6 through 8. Now, there are a lot of middle schools, you know, or a few middle schools certainly in the state that are 5-8. But it is nice. You're kind of bridging that gap. You know, one thing that was challenging last year with our K-5 math program, all math programs are K-5 and then 6-8, trying to pilot with just a few teachers at the middle school. And it wasn't, you know, it was very different. Yes, we're collaborating with Mount Vernon. So we were in, you know, 2 different buildings as it was. And then we had just a few, 3 fifth grade teachers over at AMS that we had to keep grabbing and pulling into our work. So, you know, because so many programs and the way our standards are written, it just eases that, that continuum and the collaboration and the communication, having them all in one building. It is a large building, but, you know, we've talked about kind of a school within a school in the new building to really help feel a little bit more cohesive. You know, and while you talk about fifth grade coming back, we're, I think, more importantly, bringing kindergarten and pre-K back. That's a huge transition. While families love Clark School because it's a great little introduction to the schools here in Amherst, and it's a lovely little school. It's a big transition for our kindergartners. And I know Kathleen and Anna have worked really hard over the past few years to try to ease that transition, bring the kindergartners over here a few times. They start meeting with first grade teachers and classrooms. But anytime you have a transition, that impacts student achievement. So we're cutting down on a transition by bringing kindergarten over, and then we're really enhancing just that collaboration and that continuum by bringing fifth grade back in. So I don't know if you would share anything more.
Yeah.
And
I-
also
go
creates
ahead.
open
Yeah.
space at the middle
It
school
does.
for us.
It does.
So now there's flexibility. We can now suddenly have other dedicated meeting space. We can have other
Mhm.
spaces for students to go and do work and have small group instruction and have meetings and other collaborative opportunities.
Yeah. And I think one of the things the committee really explored was they were first, you know, figuring out the type of project we would, you know, engage in is the developmental levels of students too, right? And the needs of a exiting fourth grader from us as a 10-year-old and then entering a middle school environment. While there are models across the state with a 5-8 middle school, there are many that are more 6-8 or more traditional junior highs with 7-8. And we think that, you know, it would be in a lot of our students' best interest for them to be with us in this elementary model that is just a little bit more of a, you know, wraparound approach, a smaller, you know, a more familiar setting as they're making some of these transitional moves and developing as, you know, preteens in that next setting too. You know, we've expanded opportunities for student leadership here at Clark Wilkins, thinking about things like principals council, student council. We see that as being just even more opportunities for these students in fifth grade, you know, at that level being true leaders in the school community versus, you know, entering the middle school where it's a little more, it's larger and kids are bigger and, you know, they're getting ready for high school and their next steps too. So that was something the committee, you know, really explored at that time.
Thanks, Jeannie. I appreciate it. We'll get time for one more question. I really want to hold it to an hour if we've got one, because everybody's got a lot of nights out this week. Everybody okay?
Can I add a little?
Please.
To kind of answer from my perspective as a school board member, your question, Jeannie. The portables and fifth grade and bringing pre-K and K all into one building, to me, is all kind of the same answer. From safety is different. I'm going to talk about educational outcomes right now. So, you know, Sue has articulated, hey, there are students who are suffering. So Charlie Applestein, he's the author of No Such Thing as a Bad Kid. He cites, you know, a kid is going to be successful if that kid has one strong relationship with a dynamic, empathetic adult. So if that kid out in the portables adult is in this building or is at Clark, we're losing that kid. And that kid's middle school experience is going to be that much more challenging because he or she lost the person. So that's one thing that I have an issue as a school board member with the portables. It's just not research-based, right? Columbia University just recently came out with an article, I think within the past year or so, about how the longer, so this is going to answer your fifth grade component a little bit. The longer a kid can stay in the elementary school model, the more successful he or she will be in the long run. And what they talk about is the confidence that the kid is able to develop in the elementary model and how it's more flexible. There's more opportunities. Because once you get into like a junior high model, you're talking about a completely different thing. It's much more rigid. And so the kids develop more confidence, more creativity. And so just to kind of bring this all full circle when we're talking about like the arts and the music, and I feel like some people don't see how that's connected to educational outcomes. It's the research tells us it is most definitely connected to educational outcomes, right? Music students do better in math. So it's all kind of full circle. And I'm really a big proponent as a school board member of not only the Amherst community, but also the school community. That the greater the school community can be, the better our kids feel, the more successful they're going to be. And then one other point that you brought up, Jeannie, that I'm just going to tweak a little bit, if you don't mind, you can feel free to tell me no. Is a new facility isn't going to benefit just our children. Having a strong school system and a strong, where the school community is the heart of our community, benefits everybody. These are the leaders. These are the people, when I am heading into the nursing home, these are the people who are going to decide what that looks like. It's our society cannot function if we're not offering a high quality public education. You know, it's for everybody. And then just to point to Steve's point about inclusivity, making sure we contain these specialized programs. Not only is it super financially responsible, so I'm a special educator as my day job, and there's talk about moving one of our students out. It's $250,000 a year to move that student out outside of the district. And it's just not right. And it's another thing that research, it benefits everybody. It doesn't just benefit that family. It develops empathetic citizens.
Yes.
Which is what I think we're trying to do. So that's just my school board piece, and sorry for going on too long.
That's great.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I think it's a great way to end it for tonight. And tomorrow night, it's safety and town school partnership. Want to come out? Thank you all. Sue,
Thank you.
Jason,
Yeah.
Kathleen, Christine, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.